this is a site that we visited uh, first time in 2007. So it was a while back. This is a site in Yunnan province in China, and it's dated to about 6 million years ago. So at the very, very end of the Miocene. And at the site, we found lots and lots of different types of animals and plants, including a baby ape, but also this giant otter. And this otter is probably about the size of a wolf. So imagine that, coming across an otter, and we think of them as very cute, right? They're small, they're very cute. We see them in the zoo. But imagine coming across one that is as big as a wolf. So when we have the specimens, then we can analyze them. There are different ways to analyze them, right? And you may be asking different questions of the same specimen. So for example, when we found the otter, right? So we have the cranium here. And when we first found our first question was, what is it? And so the analysis that were undertaken to answer that question of what is it is very different from analysis we would undertake to answer the question, what was it doing? What was it eating? Right? So the very first studies done on the otter cranium was really looking at characters that it had that helped us name it, identify it to a species, and then also put it into like where it is in the evolutionary history of otters. And we named a new species, actually, Siamogale melilutra. And the species name melilutra is in reference to the fact that this head, even though it looks like an otter, and it is an otter, it has distinctive otter traits, that its teeth actually has badger-like traits. So they, it was funny because our carnivore specialist, Dr. Wang, we had a discussion about this because it looked like an otter. That head clearly looked like an otter, but then when he looked at the teeth, he was like, "Oh, this is very odd for an otter." and so it has a lot of characters that really align it more with badgers. And so what this means is that. And this actually, this allowed us to really think about the placement of this otter in the evolutionary history of otters, and that this is probably one of the basal otters, the ones that are close to the root of sort of when the otter lineage diverged. It was just a really, really cool find in this case, that here's something that looks like an otter, but still retains these primitive traits. And that really helped us understand where it is in the evolution history.
So that means that it's different than modern otters, first of all. So we can't just rely on our idea of a little cute otter swimming around in the zoo. This was obviously much bigger, and we can't just presume that it was as aquatic or, that it had the same adaptations, because this was 6 million years ago. So anyway, this is an opportunity to look at the bones and study the shape changes that happen on the bones and relate those to locomotor patterns from modern mustelids, which is the broader carnivore group that otters belong to. I collected a bunch of data, a bunch of measurements from modern mustelid species, including badgers, like as kind of all across the board. And then I compared those measurements with the measurements to Siamogale melilutra. Mustelids, the group that they belong to, they separate into very distinct locomotor groups. Like otters are very specialized for swimming, badgers are very specialized for digging. There are groups of mustelids that are very specialized for climbing. And so this combination of a digging otter sounds kind of weird, but And it was weird at the time, but it makes sense for what otters were doing. Otters were pretty primitive at that time. And one of the most primitive set of adaptations were also for digging. So this makes sense in terms of like, this is kind of before otters became as specialized in swimming and things. I can start with the femur. This is the best preserved postcranial bone that we have, which is good because the femur tells us a lot about locomotion and also about body size. It's a very good proxy for body size. So this red bone is the femur from a modern, it's a 3D print, obviously, from a modern Eurasian otter. So this is a typical, size that you would expect from a modern otter. And then this is Siamogale. And then just for fun, this is a black bear. So, so this gives us a pretty clear idea of what the size was to begin with. And then we can start to look at particular bumps and grooves and pits and things like that to tell us something about muscle attachments. And so this involves, this is related to measurements as well, distances between, just like how wide the proximal end is, how wide the distal end is. Those are important measurements, but also, just looking at the gross morphology. So one thing that really jumps out is that there's this bump here. So the bear has something similar, but it's not really there in Lutra. So this actually is one of the, I interpreted this to be one of the digging adaptations. So this is a third trochanter, and you only see this in a certain number of other mammal groups. And so horses are one of them. And so what this function, there's only one muscle that attaches here, and there's a whole bunch of other gluteal muscles that attach here. So the fact that all of this whole area of the greater trochanter and third trochanter, because they're so well developed, tells us that there was a lot of hip stabilization. There was the glutes were basically all attaching right here, and that's thought to be an adaptation for digging because you need a very stable pelvis to be able to resist the forces that are being generated by the forelimbs for digging. So that's just an example of one of the morphologies that points to digging. And another one is the length of this process, which is called the olecranon process. And this is just simply a lever that all of the triceps muscles attach to here. So the longer the olecranon process, the more mechanical advantage the forelimb has. So that's another thing, that another example, but general proportions tell us a lot of things too.
Well, we are entering into a time period of climate instability. We've been pretty lucky so far as a species. We've really been living in the last 10,000 years in a time period of extraordinarily stability. And so, this allows us, looking at animals and ecosystems from times of transition, allows us to understand how an ecosystem changes, how animals and plants respond to some large-scale changes. And that better equips us, I think, for understanding what's going on today, how the plants and animals today might also respond, and helps us, I think, plan better for our future. What do we need to do as the only species today that is capable of changing our environment